I'm Kathie. This is our third installment in our four-part series on how to put together layered curriculum lesson plan. We started our first week by taking the lesson planner out of the back of the layered curriculum workbook. We photocopied it. We went through our textbook. We're making a unit on vascular plants for a high school biology class. And by using the textbook section objectives to give me some ideas, I wrote the main C-layer objectives that my students needed to learn on this particular lesson, and I offered them a couple of assignment choices for each of those objectives. That's how we put the C layer together. For the B layer then, again, we got some ideas generated from our textbook. I broke that down into some main general categories: compare and contrast, problem solving, actually demonstrate that you know these ideas. And again, I listed some assignment choices for the students to do to meet those particular objectives. Today then we want to work on the A layer. That's our last layer for layered curriculum. The C layer was basic rote information. The B layer allowed students to play around with the concepts a little bit. The A layer now is asking kids to do critical thinking. A layer questions are real world questions. These are questions that are debatable. Try very much to make them current events. The important thing is that these are questions where there's no objectively right and wrong answer, that our students could actually go out and find research to support more than one view on this particular topic. So again, looking through the textbook, generating some ideas, just thinking about current events that are going on in the world, what kinds of A-layer questions could I offer my students to tackle? And I've come up with a couple of topics here for them. One of the things that this particular chapter spent a lot of time talking about was fossil fuels. The breakdown of prehistoric ferns, those fern forests that are now turned into carbon, which then turned into our oil, which we now are harvesting, and how many years ago that was. So of course that's a very topical issue in terms of fossil fuels versus renewable sources of energy. So that certainly is going to be one of my A-layer questions, is talking about fossil fuels versus renewable sources, and what is the argument against it, and what's wrong with taking the fossil fuels, and how long did it take to make these fossil fuels, and the process to them, and what are our odds of renewing those versus what types of renewable energy. So we're going to look at that as an A-layer question. One of the other A-layer questions that I had revolved around forest fires and national forests. I know we learned a lot several years ago when we had the big forest fire in Yellowstone in terms of particularly the coniferous forests that could reseed themselves only after a forest fire. So we can look at some of the issues around that, and what kinds of things are they now doing in forests to have control burns. Should we intentionally burn forests once in a while in order to keep them up? Should we wait for them to naturally burn on their own? What types of lessons have we learned in terms of forest management and fires? The third question that I came up with had to do with the flower industry. One of the things that I saw in the news recently was talking about most of the flowers that we have in our flower shops here in the United States are actually imported from out of the country. So we're going to look at the carbon footprint that entails. So when you get those pretty orchids, or those nice roses, or that bouquet that you're giving your mother for Mother's Day, what kind of carbon footprint is that leaving? And should we be looking at other ways to provide flowers for special occasions in this country to reduce our carbon footprint? Is that a significant issue for us or not? And then the fourth one talks about paper industry, particularly here in the Northeast. We are losing our paper industry because of economic reasons. And what type of effect is that having then on forests and replanting of trees? I know at first glance you might think, well, if we're not harvesting them for paper, then we'll have more trees. But in reality, there's a lot of research out showing we end up with less trees because the paper industry has to replant as they harvest those. So we're going to look at the pros and cons of the demise of the paper industry, particularly here in the Northeast. So there, I've got 4 A-layer questions that I can offer the students. They're going to choose one of those. They're going to have to go out and find some research on them, summarize the research, and then actually form an opinion on the topic. Now I've got all 3 of my layers for my unit on vascular plants. For more information on how to put these together, you can take a look at the Layered Curriculum textbook, you can take a look at the workbook, or you can go to brains.org.